When I found that photo album, I was cleaning my son's house. It turns out my husband, Felipe, during the 1 month he was supposedly on business trips every year, was actually traveling with his first love from his youth, exploring mountains, rivers, and seas, from the age of 50 to 75. From the snowy peaks of Changbai Mountain to the clear waters and white sands of Hainan Island, from black hair to gray, they had traveled across the country, a lifetime passing in the blink of an eye. I sat there in shock all afternoon, thinking back carefully, wondering what I had been doing over the past 25 years. 3 meals a day, caring for my in-laws, raising our children. I was always busy, and when our children finally started their own families, I had to help take care of the grandchildren. Chapter 1. It was a Friday afternoon. My son's family was leaving for a weekend road trip, and before they left, my grandson, pouting, asked me to take good care of his pet cat. Of course, I agreed wholeheartedly, smiling as I assured him to enjoy the trip. After refilling the cat food and cleaning the litter box, a gust of wind blew across the table, lifting the fine dust. I sighed and picked up a cloth to start cleaning. That's when I found the album on the coffee table. I casually flipped it open, expecting it to be my grandson's photo collection, but it wasn't. It was like a travel diary, with the backgrounds of the photos varying, but the same couple was in every shot. They stood arm in arm, silver-haired but brimming with life, from the snowy peaks of Changbai Mountain to the clear waters and white sands of Hainan Island, and even the vast grasslands and the crescent spring in the desert. All across the country, in every season, my hands trembled, barely able to hold on to the album. The most recent photo showed the two of them, fingers tightly intertwined, standing in front of a waterfall cascading from the white clouds. On the back, there was a handwritten note: Lushan, Zhejiang, like a river of stars falling from the heavens. Felipe and Roxana. September 2023. It was Felipe's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. In the photo, Felipe was wearing a blue shirt, and Roxana was dressed in a blue qipao. Against the backdrop of mountains and valleys, they looked ethereal, like a perfect couple despite the wrinkles on their faces. But Felipe is my husband of nearly 50 years, and Roxana is the first love from his youth, the one he could never have. I remember this blue shirt of his. Last September, he told me he had to go out of town to give a lecture. Before he left, I personally ironed every shirt until they were perfectly smooth, including this one. As I flipped through the album, each photo had a date on it, 1 photo per year, with no gaps in the timeline. Occasionally, there was a line of poetry or a brief reflection written on the back. I skimmed through the album quickly, and the older photos at the bottom had already yellowed. The sense of age overwhelming. I could barely make out their younger selves. In the snow-covered Changbai Mountain, he wrote, "If one day we stand in the snow together, this life will count as growing old together." Felipe and Roxana. November 1998. The handwriting had faded, but the forceful strokes were unmistakable, strong and deliberate. Yes, the two of them, from youth to old age, from black hair to silver. How could this not count as growing old together? How absurd it all is. My husband, Felipe, 75 years old, a renowned doctor, has spent 1 month every year traveling with his first love, Roxana, exploring mountains and rivers, from 50 to 75. It felt like a burning fire was raging inside my chest, searing my insides. Yet at the same time, it was as if a cold wind had blown through, making it impossible to open my eyes. I wanted to call Felipe immediately and demand to know what this was all about. But 25 years, why did he keep it from me for 25 years? The moment I took out my phone, it was as if all the strength drained from my body. Tears fell like broken beads onto the floor, and my hands and feet turned cold. The sun had set, and the whole world suddenly turned dark. I sat there on the floor, unable to understand how my life had come to this. Chapter 2. It was getting late, and Felipe had called several times, urging me to come home. I put the photo album into my bag and slowly made my way home. The walk, which normally took 10 minutes, stretched into half an hour. When I got home, Felipe was sitting at the computer, fully focused on writing his report. Though he was in his twilight years, His posture remained straight and strong. He worked with the same calm and seriousness that he had when he was younger. Why did it take you so long? What were you busy with? Aren't you going to make dinner? I glanced at the empty dining table, then at the cold, quiet kitchen, and suddenly, I laughed. If I don't cook, can't you do it just once? He raised an eyebrow in surprise. What's this about? Are you in a bad mood? Did our son upset you again? If you're unhappy, let's just go out to eat. As it happens, I have to leave again next week for a trip, so you'll need to take care of the house on your own. Let's take it easy today and enjoy some freedom like young people. I watched as he closed the computer and went to the entryway to change his shoes. His face had aged, but the gentle expression in his eyes was still the same as I remembered. Could you not go? What? I'm asking if you could stay. Not just this time, never go again after this year. He frowned, clearly confused. What are you talking about? You know this is my job. At my level as a professor, giving lectures all over the country is perfectly normal. Felipe, you're 75. I said quietly. And are you really only giving lectures? You don't need to go anymore. He stopped in his tracks, looking at me with a strange expression. What do you mean by that? Are you doubting me? Where I go for lectures is reported in the news, don't you watch? Yes. Every year when Felipe went for his academic trips, there was always some news coverage. That's why I never had even the slightest doubt. He had deceived me for 25 years. I used to think that since he was already so busy and tired with his work, I should take care of everything at home, so he wouldn't have any worries. As a couple, we should support each other. Felipe and I never had any dramatic love stories, but we always treated each other with respect. In 50 years, we had hardly ever fought. I thought this was another way to navigate a marriage. I looked up and met his eyes, seeing the impatience and anger in them, and for a moment, it all seemed so pointless. So, I took out the photo album. Felipe, is this meaningful to you? His eyes widened in shock, and he nearly snatched it out of my hands, his voice rising in anger. You went through my things? Emma, we've been married for a lifetime, and now you're checking up on me? I never thought you were this kind of person. Roxana and I did have some feelings for each other when we were young, but now we're just old classmates. Can't a person have the right to reminisce about their youth? Besides, what do you think we could do at this age? Emma, you're being completely irrational. Throughout my life, I've seen his back countless times. The back of him wearing his white coat as he walked into the operating room. The back of him bent over his desk writing reports late into the night. So many overlapping memories, all frozen in that moment when he stormed out today. A deep sense of panic and sadness welled up in my heart. Chapter 3. Felipe and I entered the first Cold War of our marriage. That night, he came home very late. When he saw the empty dinner table and the dark house, he slammed the door to his study without saying a word. In the days that followed, I stopped cooking and doing laundry for Felipe. The dinner table only had food for me. He left the house early and came back late, saying nothing. His dirty clothes piled up in a basket, and the shirts I used to iron so carefully were now thrown in, wrinkled in a heap. When our son's family returned from their trip, they came to visit me. Grandma, look! I brought you a special souvenir sachet. There's one for you and one for Grandpa. My 7-year-old grandson, Lucas, handed me 2 small sachets in his sweet voice. I smiled and patted his head. Thank you, Lucas. Sweetie, go play in your room for a bit. My daughter-in-law gently coaxed our grandson, then cautiously began. Mom, we were away for a few days. Is everything okay between you and Dad? I kept my head down, quietly picking at my food, and said nothing. Elias couldn't help but jump in. Mom, what are you doing? He started with accusations, his impatience clear in his tone. Yes, Dad left that album at our house on purpose, but that's only because he didn't want to upset you by leaving it at home, right? Honestly, Mom, how old are you? Why are you still getting worked up over these romantic affairs? Acting like this with Dad, aren't you just giving the neighbors and relatives something to laugh about? And think about everything Dad's done for this family over his lifetime. He's old now. Isn't it normal for him to look back on the past? I've met Auntie Roxana too. She's so reasonable and kind. There's nothing shady going on between them, they're just catching up. Why are you being so harsh? He rambled on while I sat there listening quietly. When he paused to grab another bite, I got up, took his favorite dish, and dumped it into the trash. Elias's chopsticks landed in empty air, and he stared at me in disbelief, shouting, "Mom, have you gone mad? What the hell are you doing?" My daughter-in-law quietly tugged on his sleeve, but that only made him angrier. He slammed his chopsticks down on the table. "Fine. If you don't want to feed me, then never cook for me again. As if I need your food. Dad was right. You're completely irrational." With that, he grabbed his wife and stormed off. My grandson was still in his room reading when Elias yanked him out, startling him into tears. I suddenly remembered when Elias was about the same age as my grandson, looking up at me with his little face, softly saying that when he grew up, he'd buy me the best things in the world. But people's hearts change, even the children you raise yourself. When Elias was young, Felipe was too busy with work to take care of him, and it was me who raised him day by day. Back then, I was the one he loved and cherished the most. Now, Felipe, with his success and ability to secure Elias's future, is naturally more important. In the middle of the night, I got up to go to the bathroom and saw Felipe crouched in front of the washing machine, staring blankly at the buttons. He looked at me, hesitated, then said nothing. I turned and headed back to bed, but his voice stopped me, low and tinged with an unexpected sadness. "Emma, my clothes are dirty. I don't have anything left to wear." I shook my head, stepped forward, and pressed the button for him. The washing machine started filling with water and began its cycle. "I'm sorry, Emma. It was wrong of me to keep this from you for so many years." He mumbled with his head down. "But please believe me, I never wanted to destroy our family." I looked at him for a long time and sighed softly. "Let's separate, Felipe." He jerked his head up, his eyes clouded with disbelief. Chapter 4. After confronting Felipe that day, it felt like the knot of tension in my chest had finally loosened. I no longer felt lost and confused, but rather clear-minded. Felipe and I were 5 years apart, and we met through a matchmaker. At that time, he had just graduated from medical school, and I was a regular office worker. Although it was an arranged meeting, there was some emotional connection between us. I knew he had been in a 3-year relationship during university, but it had ended due to opposition from the woman's parents. Back then, he had been completely honest about his relationship with Roxana. He told me that the past was in the past and that he would move forward, and I agreed. From there, we entered into marriage, and just like that, 50 years passed. When Felipe was still an intern, he devoted almost all of his time to his work, doing research with his mentor, assisting in the operating room, seeing patients, and working night shifts. Everything at home fell on my shoulders. At that time, his salary was meager, and I didn't dare quit my job. I worked during the day and took care of his ailing mother and our young children at night. Even in his mother's final days, I was the one who stayed by her side, day by day, until she peacefully closed her eyes. Felipe rushed back from the operating room in a panic, his hands shaking as he held mine. Emma, thank goodness for you." Later, as he started to achieve some success, our lives gradually became more comfortable. I thought that after all the hardships we'd endured, we could live out the rest of our lives peacefully, following the usual routine. But here I am, at 70, and Felipe at 75, and it seems we can't go on anymore. Before I retired, I was an accountant. I managed countless financial accounts throughout my life. But in the end, I found myself sorting through the division of assets in my 50-year marriage with Felipe. I moved into a small house under my name, leaving the divorce agreement with Felipe. He held that thin piece of paper for a long time. Without saying a word, I told him, "It's okay. The law gives you a 30-day cooling-off period. You can think it over carefully." While packing, I threw away a lot of old things, those things that I had held onto for decades, but no longer had any use for. Gave me a sense of refreshing clarity when I finally discarded them. I suppose this is what they call decluttering or letting go. After hearing that I had filed for divorce, My son sent me dozens of voice messages in a row. I listened to a few, each one blaming me for being disrespectful for my age, reckless, and selfish. I chose to ignore the rest, perhaps out of anger. He hasn't visited me even once since I moved out. At 70, I suddenly found myself with a vast amount of free time. After resting for 2 days, I signed up for a tour, first visiting Tiananmen Square in Beijing, then traveling northward along the route, enjoying a full 30-day trip, without the need to worry about saving money. I found that traveling really is a relaxing and enjoyable experience. I took photos of the scenery along the way and, imitating the younger generation, posted a picture of myself at Tiananmen Square on social media. To my surprise, it received countless likes, including one from Felipe. He even commented, "Emma, have fun and stay safe." Several mutual friends chimed in, praising and admiring the bond they believed we still had. Felipe also sent me private messages, sometimes asking where certain things were in the house, sometimes sharing pictures of simple noodle soups he had made, and occasionally sending me weather updates, reminding me to bring an umbrella or dress warmly. I didn't reply to any of them, feeling calm, without the slightest ripple in my heart. When I returned from my trip, I was greeted by an unexpected visitor. Chapter 5. It wasn't until Roxana came to find me that I realized something wasn't quite right. Felipe had said that he would be going away again next week, but now over a month has passed, and he still hasn't left. So, is it because Felipe broke his routine this year that Roxana has come all the way to our city? She sat across from me with a smile, wearing a high-quality qipao. Her face was not young, but her every movement was imbued with the grace and elegance of time. Compared to her, I truly looked like a simple old lady. They say that what you can't have in your youth haunts you for life, especially if it's a person. So, it's understandable that Felipe sees her as his unattainable dream girl. Emma, isn't it? You're younger than Felipe, so you're younger than me as well. I should call you little sister, she said with a smile. I'm sorry that I've caused some friction between you and Felipe. I stayed silent, and she kept smiling, speaking slowly and softly. Emma, dear, you really don't need to be troubled by this. Felipe and I are simply fulfilling a promise we made decades ago. You probably don't know, but when Felipe and I were in university, we made a vow to see the world together. The class reunion in '98 made us realize we were getting old, and if we didn't travel soon, we might never get the chance. It's quite amusing, really, a promise made in our 20s, and we didn't start until our 50s. I smiled as well and said, so you traveled all this way just to tell me your love story? Emma, dear, marriage is marriage, and love is love. I'm sure you've lived long enough to know the difference. You might not believe me, but neither Felipe nor I ever wanted to hurt you. Her tone was gentle and unhurried. Her eyes filled with a smile, but I could see a subtle challenge behind it. So I stood up, paid for the coffee, and looked into her eyes seriously. I don't know if love and marriage can be separated, but perhaps you or Felipe could have told me the truth from the start. If you want that old man, you can have him. I've never been one for coffee. Don't really like it. But since you came all this way, I wanted to extend some courtesy. And by the way, it must have been hard on you, spending your whole life as the shadowy third party, from the mistress of the past to the old third wheel of today. I smiled again. No wonder you rushed over this year. As you said, if you didn't come soon, it might have been too late. Her face instantly changed, and I turned to leave, but just outside the cafe, I saw Felipe, his face pale. He reached out to me. Emma, you. I stepped back. Did you sign the papers? His hand fell weakly to his side as he mumbled. It's not what you think. Do we really have to go this far? We've spent a lifetime together. We still have. Felipe, when will you finally take responsibility? I sneered. You had no courage when you were 20, too afraid to stand up to her parents for your so-called true love. When you were 50 and successful, you still didn't have the guts to face your marriage and infidelity honestly. And now, at 75, you still lack the nerve to take responsibility. You've always been this way, hiding behind women, wanting everything. But life doesn't work like that, does it? He stood there, stunned, a look of panic and helplessness on his face. Chapter 6. Felipe finally signed the divorce papers. My son Elias couldn't hold back and came to confront me, furious on the phone. "Mom, I really don't get what's going through your head. You're old, and you still want a divorce? You're just throwing away a lifetime's home like it's nothing. And what about the asset division? Honestly, Dad has spoiled you too much. Look at what you're taking. Is that fair? Most of the family's income was earned by him. How can you take so much?" I replied calmly, "You're in your 30s. You should know the term marital property and think carefully about those first 20 years when you were still growing up. Who was really supporting this family? And by the way, I may be old, but I'm only 70. Do you think that means I'm ready for the grave?" He was taken aback, but then raised his voice, stubbornly continuing, "Sure, you did your part for the family, but the work you did was no more than what a hired maid could do. Anyone could do it for money, so why should you get so much of Dad's money?" I laughed out of sheer disbelief. "Elias, are you a pig? Do you not have a brain? Your father is the one at fault. Even if he left with nothing, he would deserve it." Instead of arguing with me, "Maybe you should think about how, when your understanding Aunt Roxana comes into the family, there'll be another legal heir to your father's limited assets. Emma, you really are heartless. Aunt Roxana is kind and understanding, not like you, always thinking about money. No wonder Dad chose her over you." I was tired of hearing his nonsense, so I hung up. 2 weeks later, I saw the family photo Elias posted online. Roxana was nestled close to Felipe, holding my grandson's hand. The 5 of them looked like a happy, harmonious family. My son wrote in the caption, "My father is my lifelong role model. After half a life, his true love is still by his side." It quickly garnered countless likes, and one comment rose to the top. "A few years ago, I met Professor Felipe and his wife while traveling in Guangxi. I thought they were such a loving, enviable couple." More comments followed, with people claiming to have seen them in various places, and they began to piece together the story from the album. Felipe and Roxana's love story went viral, with netizens calling them the real-life example of growing old together. Elias sent me a message. "Did you see it? The happy family everyone is blessing, it's the one you gave up." I was speechless and replied, "Maybe I should post my divorce certificate online, so the world can see that this epic love was actually an affair." I saw that he was typing, but after waiting several minutes, he never replied. Of course, I didn't actually do it. On one hand, after 50 years of marriage, I didn't want to burn bridges. On the other hand, I'm only 70. If I take care of myself, I feel like I still have many years to experience the beauty of life. I don't want to waste precious time on people and things that aren't worth it. While my life was peaceful, Felipe's life was about to take a turn for the worse. Chapter 7. After I left, Roxana moved in with Felipe. At first, everything seemed harmonious. Felipe had finally reunited with his dream girl. My son thought Roxana was elegant and dignified, and even my grandson liked her gentle voice, calling her grandma at every turn. But someone had to handle the housework, and Roxana, who had always lived a pampered life, wasn't the type to lift a finger. My son eagerly hired a maid. With the housework covered, someone still had to pick up and drop off the grandson from school. My daughter-in-law didn't trust the maid with this task, so my son asked Roxana. She agreed with a smile, reassuring them to focus on work. My son was very grateful. "I knew you were the best. Aunt Roxana, you're just like my dad, both intellectuals. So different from those ignorant old people." But after just a few days, Roxana almost lost my grandson. One afternoon after school, she took him to a mall to shop, but while she was in a clothing store, he ran off when she wasn't looking. She panicked, calling the police and mall security. Fortunately, after some searching, they found him on another floor, furious and shaken. Roxana scolded him. "Didn't we agree you'd wait for me in the store? I was only trying on clothes for a few minutes. Why did you run off?" My daughter-in-law arrived just in time to witness the scene. She didn't show any reaction on the surface, but after bringing my grandson home, she forced my son to come and apologize to me. My son resisted, saying Roxana had never raised children, and it was understandable that she made a mistake. He assured his wife that Roxana would be more careful in the future. But that evening, Felipe called my son, gently hinting that Roxana was in pain from her back and was exhausted after running around so much. He suggested they find someone else to handle the school pickups. My daughter-in-law scoffed and dragged my son to my house to apologize. "Mom, I was wrong before. Don't hold it against me," my son said, hanging his head. "But I was just angry, and it was in the heat of the moment. You pushed me, didn't you?" I didn't say anything, and my son let out a few awkward laughs before wandering around my house, eventually lying down on my new massage chair. "Mom, I have to say, you really know how to enjoy yourself after the divorce. This massage chair, I've seen at the mall, it costs 80 to 90,000 yuan. You sure don't hold back." I blocked his words with a retort, "Well, since I took so much of your dad's money, how else am I supposed to spend it?" He rubbed his nose awkwardly. "Mom, don't hold a grudge. You're not going to abandon your son too, are you? Lucas is your grandson. I know you wouldn't just leave him uncared for." My daughter-in-law chimed in earnestly. "Mom, Elias was foolish before, and I've already spoken to him. No matter what, we've always appreciated everything you've done for our little family. Lucas almost got lost this time, and I don't trust leaving him with anyone else anymore." "Mom, could you possibly? I've enrolled in a senior university, so I won't be free during the weekdays. But if Lucas needs someone on the weekends, you can bring him over here." I hesitated a little. My son's eyes widened. "Since when did you enroll in a senior university? You're really going all out." I glanced at him and said, "I'm learning piano. I just bought one, and the delivery's arriving this afternoon." He frowned, ready to say something more, but my daughter-in-law quickly pinched him, smiling warmly. "Mom, it's great that you've enrolled in a senior university. It's wonderful to cultivate your interests. We'll figure something out for Lucas." Chapter 8. 2 months later, I heard more about Felipe's situation from my daughter-in-law when she came to visit with my grandson. Her gaze turned cold when she mentioned Roxana. "She's acting like the lady of the house, redecorating everything in a gaudy style. And now, she's pestering Dad about getting a marriage certificate." "Don't worry, Mom. I've already talked to Elias, and we're both firmly opposed to them getting married. When you were still around, we didn't have to worry about anything and could just focus on work. But now, we've had to put Lucas in daycare, and Elias is constantly being roped into doing chores for her." She winked at me, adding, "I heard Dad hasn't agreed to marry her yet. They've been arguing. I think the old man's still got some sense. He knows that having fun is one thing, but getting married is a whole different story." I couldn't help but chuckle silently, so I focused on cutting fruit for my grandson. After all, everyone has their own perspective. Different perspectives lead to conflicts of interest, and choices naturally differ. I didn't know why Felipe hadn't agreed to marry Roxana, but it made perfect sense for my son and his family to oppose it, especially after the incident where Roxana nearly lost Lucas. She blamed the child for running off instead of taking responsibility herself. Any daughter-in-law would feel resentment over something like that. What I didn't expect was that not only was Felipe's household still in chaos, but he and Roxana had also made the news again. And this time, unlike the previous outpouring of support, they were facing a lot of skepticism. It all started when a former university classmate of theirs saw the news and commented online, "Professor Felipe and Roxana were the golden couple of our university back in the day. Unfortunately, they had to bow to reality and went their separate ways. At a recent reunion, we all talked about how sad it was that they split up, but now it turns out they've gotten back together." This comment caused quite a stir, and soon netizens began digging deeper into the story. As questions and answers flew back and forth, people began to realize that this so-called true love wasn't a seamless journey from first love to growing old together. Both Felipe and Roxana had married other people, and Roxana had even been married twice before reuniting with her old flame. Some people defended them, saying, "A dream girl is always a dream girl." Even after decades apart, their hearts still beat fast when they reunited. If this isn't true love, what is? Others were more sympathetic to Felipe's ex-wife. If the dream girl is true love, am I the only one feeling sorry for Professor Felipe's original wife? And a particularly sharp comment got straight to the point. Earlier, People were sharing about how Felipe and his dream girl traveled together for decades, but according to their classmates, they were still married to other people during those years. So, does that mean they were both cheating? People's natural curiosity took over, and the story spread like wildfire. Netizens began piecing together the truth, helped by various insiders spilling the beans. In the end, what was once a heartwarming tale of rekindled love turned into a scandal, and the entire internet went from praising them to criticizing them. You've got to be kidding me. A medical expert involved in a scandal? This is straight up decades of cheating. Stop defending this. If you do, I hope you end up with a partner just like Felipe. Calling her dream girl is disgusting. She knew he was married and still chose to be the other woman for decades. Please don't tarnish the term dream girl. The dream girl can die, but it can't rot. Chapter 9. The next time I saw Felipe was in a hospital bed. My son called to tell me that Felipe had a huge argument with Roxana and then collapsed. Now, he's bedridden and unable to move. He said, "Mom, just take pity on Dad. After all, you've been married for so long. Please go see him." I didn't want to go, but in the end, I decided to visit. I told myself it would be like saying goodbye to an old friend after all these years. Felipe lay in the hospital bed, thinner than before, looking more haggard. His hair, which was once graying, had now turned completely white. When he saw me, he smiled a little. "Emma, you're willing to come see me. That's good." I thought that in this situation, I would feel some emotion, maybe sadness or nostalgia, but strangely, I only felt a sense of detachment and unfamiliarity. He struggled to extend his hand toward me. "Emma, I heard from our son that you're learning to play the piano. If I get better, I'd love to hear you play. Tiananmen Square, it's really majestic, isn't it? I regret not being able to see it with you. If I had the chance, I'd want to watch the flag-raising ceremony with you." I frowned as he coughed violently before continuing. "Please don't rush off yet. Let me say what's on my mind. These thoughts have been with me for days, and I'm afraid if I don't say them now, I'll never get the chance. Since you left, I don't know why, but I often see you around the house, like you never really left. I know I wronged you, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I often think back to the day you asked me not to go, not to travel with Roxana. If I hadn't argued with you that day, if I had realized things sooner, maybe we'd still be okay." He brought up that conversation, and I felt a faint pain in my chest, as if I were being pulled back to that dark afternoon when I sat on the floor, crying. I shook my head and slowly began to speak. "You wouldn't. Being fickle is your nature. If you had ever been sincere, you wouldn't have gone traveling with Roxana back in '98. Today you say you've had a change of heart, but it's only because the dream girl of your youth has turned into a mere grain of rice on your dinner plate. Meanwhile, I've become something surprising to you because I walked away faster than you could have imagined. That's how you are always unable to cherish anything, constantly yearning for what you can't have." He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was a deep sense of self-mockery and bitterness in his gaze. "Yes, but Emma, we've been together for 50 years. Don't you feel even a trace of affection left? We've spent a lifetime together, can't we turn back?" I let out a sarcastic laugh. "Felipe, can you turn back time? Can you give me back those 50 clean years? Why would I hold on to a marriage filled with betrayal? Am I some kind of fool?" He also laughed bitterly, his voice hoarse. Felipe, a man who has healed countless people in my life, can't heal myself. In the end, I've ended up with nothing." I turned to leave, opening the door to see my son and daughter-in-law standing outside. My son called out softly, "Mom," reaching out as if to hold me, while my daughter-in-law pressed her lips together, her gaze filled with a quiet sorrow. Chapter 10. Later, I finally learned the reason behind Felipe and Roxana's final, intense argument. Roxana came to see me again, just like last time. She was dressed with meticulous elegance, though now there was a cloudy sorrow in her eyes, replacing the clarity and self-assurance from our last encounter. She slid a glass of plain water toward me and said, "Last time you told me you didn't like coffee, so I ordered plain water for you this time. You won." Emma, her lips curved into a faint smile, but her complexion looked terrible. "Last time, I told you that you had Felipe's marriage while I took his love. Now, It seems I was too naive. Emma, I lost. I'm leaving. I watched her and slowly sipped the water in front of me. She continued talking to herself. Do you know why Felipe and I argued? The entire internet is cursing me, calling me indecent, saying I'm an old woman who doesn't know self-respect, a mistress my whole life. I begged him. I told him I wouldn't push for marriage anymore. I just wanted him to release a statement saying that you two divorced 25 years ago. Just one simple lie could clear my name. But he wouldn't. He would rather see his own reputation ruined, watch me get insulted and humiliated, than tell people that your marriage had long since ended. I felt like laughing. I wanted to curse her, telling her that it was the truth. She had been a mistress all her life, and deserved to be condemned. But I swallowed the words. There are no winners or losers here. If we're being honest, you only lost your love, while I wasted my entire life. Roxana left. Felipe didn't die, but his health weakened, and his memory deteriorated rapidly. The doctors diagnosed him with Alzheimer's. His achievements in medicine were undisputed, and even as he aged and fell ill, waves of students came to visit him, and countless head physicians consulted on his case. But he had begun to forget people and events. At my senior university, I took my studies seriously. The teacher even praised me. I could now play a full song, and when I posted a video online, it became a minor hit. I also started traveling the world. Even though I was alone, standing in front of those famous landmarks still filled me with excitement. I boarded a plane to France, heading to see the Eiffel Tower. After I landed, I received a video from my son. Felipe sat in a wheelchair, wearing thick glasses, staring intently at the phone. He was watching a video of me playing Marriage d'Amour on the piano. Felipe, who had forgotten so much, cried like a child as tears rolled down his cheeks while watching the video. I felt either sadness or joy. This scene felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The beautiful landscape before me was vast, and Felipe, who had entangled himself in my life for 50 years, now seemed nothing more than a fleeting dream. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl smiled at me, greeting me in Chinese. Hello, Grandma. I smiled back. I am only 70, and even at 70, I can still have a beautiful new beginning.